What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here with a new daily video. All of the stories therein are new to this channel as well as I can keep track of. So if you guys end up enjoying this video and you guys are enjoying these daily videos, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. It really helps the video to do well and ensures I can keep making these videos daily for a long time to come. If you guys have any thoughts you'd like to share in the comments, either about the stories or the video itself, please be sure to leave them in the comments below, as one of my favorite parts about doing this is reading your guys' comments, even if I may not always be able to respond to them. Either way, I'm gonna let you guys enjoy the next hour or so of true scary stories, and I'll see you again at the end of the video. Thanks for watching. So I can't entirely say I know what's happening here, as to this day I still have no clue who did and is doing this to me. This all started when I was in 8th grade, the very first time it happened. This was a good 6 or 7 years ago, mind you. I live in a sweet southern suburb outside Austin, Texas with my family. Being as I'm the oldest of the 4 of us, I was always home alone because my siblings had parks and rec, sports, things like that, and I didn't really do any extracurriculars. It was a weeknight and my family were all at my sister's gymnastics tournament. I had been supposed to go as well, as all of the members of the family had to attend all our siblings' stuff, but I was sick. I've always been a fairly cautious creature, one who makes sure the doors are locked when I'm alone. Because of my lifelong love of anything and everything scary, naturally I had watched more than a few episodes of Criminal Minds and the like before heading to the 3rd floor, where my parents' room is, to take a bath in their fancy tub. It was about 8:30. It was in the winter as well, so it had long since gotten dark outside. About 20 minutes into my bath, though, I started to hear footsteps. Loud ones, like big work boots, walking up the steps. My dad, being a construction worker, did wear some big boots, so I thought it might have been him. I called out though and heard nothing in response. The steps kept on going though, before reaching the top. Then all the sounds stopped and I didn't hear anything else. I turned the water off and listened for a while, but there was still nothing. I turned the water back on and went back to reading my book in the tub. The next night, one of my sisters had their final game. This game was a very late one in a town about 25 miles away, so again, my family went together after making me dinner. I almost decided to go since I was feeling a little bit better, but I didn't because my mom didn't want to risk getting people outside the family sick. I really wish I had gone with them though. Like usual, I locked up the side door and ate some ice cream while watching a bunch of scary shows. I then headed up to my parents' room to take another fancy bath and read more of my book. This time it was a bit later though, almost around 10 or so. I was taking a very long bath and had already forgotten about the night before, until that sound happened again. I heard those same footsteps creeping up the stairs. Mind you, our stairs are hardwood, not carpet, so you could hear when someone was stepping on them quite clearly. The house was dead silent too, except the sound of the TV, which I had left turned on in the room outside the bathroom. I automatically turned the water off again and felt my heart almost stop beating. I was so scared. The footsteps this time seemed quite hurried, like the person was skipping up the steps in a rush. Once again, they stopped when they reached the top. I waited for almost 5 minutes, and nothing. I turned the water back on and picked up my old track phone and dialed my mom's number. She picked up and I started talking right away, asking if it was her. She didn't reply, but I could hear someone on the other end breathing. I started to get a bit mad. Why was she messing with me like this and not replying? All of a sudden though, a deep voice called back through the phone, which made me almost drop it in the tub. It snapped at me. "I am not your mom." Then they hung up. As if instantly, banging started on the bathroom door. I burst into tears. This was not just knocking. They were smashing that door like it was going to fall down. This entire person's weight was being thrown into it. I dialed 911. Right when I hit send, the banging stopped and I hung up. I really didn't know if my family was just playing a trick on me. The last thing I wanted to do was have the cops come. I was already a troubled kid, so I might get in even more trouble. I stayed there in the bathroom, sitting in the corner wrapped in a towel for over 30 minutes before I heard my family's minivan pull up into the driveway. At that moment, I started crying even more. I knew that whoever was just in my house was not a member of my family. My mom called out my name, and I responded by telling them I was upstairs. I was not leaving this room until I knew I was safe. I told her what had happened, and she didn't believe me at first. The door was still locked when they got home, so how could someone have just gotten in? It turned out she had left her phone at home on the counter by accident, so when I told her to get it, she went to right where she'd left it. There it was, sitting right on the counter. No incoming call in the phone's memory either. I showed her my phone though, which clearly still had the outgoing call on it. This didn't add up. For a while, she thought I must have had some sort of mental break that night, or hallucinated everything. To ease my mind though, we added a chain lock to every door in the house. For 5 years, nothing extreme like that ever happened again. Life did get pretty busy though. I got involved in activities that made sure I was never home alone again. I joined sports in every season, volunteered, anything and everything I could do. Every month or so though, I would hear these distinct footsteps on the porch below me. I lived on the second floor in the bedroom on the far left side directly over the front porch, so I could hear everything, even my dog sighing. It would always be someone like pacing back and forth. Then my dog would start barking and immediately the steps would stop. It got so bad one night when I was 15, I woke up myself and the twins. We all met in the hall, fully prepared to go down and attack whoever was on our porch. My brother equipped with his baseball bat. Once we got downstairs though, it stopped. It wasn't until this last summer, just as I'd turned 18 and finished my first year of college, that the scariest moment happened to me. It was a weekend night, and my parents had gotten accustomed to going out of town pretty much twice a month, leaving me, my brother, and my sister home alone. They took my other brother, who was only 9. This night, the twins were going to a party in the neighboring town, though, and would not be coming home until the next day. I saw this as the perfect time to camp out downstairs in the living room, make a bunch of food, watch a bunch of movies, and get high. I FaceTimed my boyfriend. Somewhere into the call, though, he said something that kind of creeped me out. I really didn't think much of it at first since I was so high, but he called out to me and asked, "You're home alone, right?" I was confused and laughed. Of course I was. Why? He shook it off, saying he thought he'd seen something in the porchway behind me, but he wasn't really sure what it was. I got up right away and walked to the laundry room. I made sure the door was closed, I double-checked all the locks, I passed down at around 1 a.m., TV on and all. All of a sudden though, I woke up to a loud banging around 3. Immediately, I was pierced with fear. It was the same loud body-slamming banging from years ago, a memory I had blocked. It started at the side door directly to my right. I couldn't move my body. I was too scared. I looked over and saw a light flashing inside, like someone was shaking a flashlight into the door. Then the same noise started at the front door, and again at the side door. All 3 doors to my house were lit up, banging so hard the entire house was shaking. Then I heard it on the front porch, like a knife or something sharp being dragged along the door. I was bawling my eyes out. I dialed 911 and started frantically explaining what was going on between my sobs. The person on the phone told me to scream out I was calling the cops, and if needed, he would send someone over. I did, and right away the house went still. Then I could hear someone laughing from all the doors, multiple different voices. This automatically made me think someone must be playing a prank on me. My friends and siblings had been known to try and scare each other. I told the man that everything seemed fine. I thought my siblings might just be playing a prank on me. I laid there and called my brother. When he answered though, I could tell right away it was not him. I could hear the party in the background, which horrified me. I told him what had happened. The twins caught an Uber and immediately came back. We spent the rest of the night texting our friends, trying to figure out who it could have been. but nothing. Almost all our friends were accounted for at that party, nearly 20 miles away, so it couldn't have been any of them. We all slept on the couch with no more occurrences that night. It's been about 5 months since then, and I've since gone back to school. I've only come home once between then and now, and currently I'm home on winter break. Nothing else odd has happened, as I've tried not to stay home alone. Last night, though, I was awake for no reason other than scrolling around on Reddit when around 2 a.m., I heard someone pacing back and forth on the porch. I texted my brother, and he confirmed that he heard it too. This happened to me in 2008 in Las Vegas. I was living with my husband and our son, who was about 2 years old at the time. I would frequently take our son to the grocery store early in the evening with me to do some shopping and give my husband some alone time. I never really worried much. The store was literally just outside my neighborhood, plus we lived in a very nice area. I finished up my shopping and put my son in his car seat. By the time I'd finished loading the car, he was passed out. I decided to quickly fill my tank at the gas station on the other side of the lot. While I was pumping gas, though, a big truck pulled up on the opposite side of my pump. The man pumped his gas and seemed to take no notice of me. Then he left. Just as I was finishing up, though, his truck suddenly pulled up next to my car once again. The man inside, who looked like he loved his meth, said, "Excuse me, miss, but I just felt compelled to tell you how beautiful you are. As a matter of fact, the only reason I came to get gas here, it's 'cause I saw you come here from the grocery store, and I just had to be nearer to you. I've been trying to find the courage to approach you for a while, actually." I was flattered and thanked him for the compliment, but quickly informed him I was off the market. I know, it was worth a shot, though. He began to pull off. Suddenly he backed up again, though, and said, "If you tell your husband what I said, I'll kill him." Then he drove off. Needless to say, this freaked me out, so immediately I called my husband. He told me not to come directly home, in case the guy followed me. I drove around a bit until I felt I'd lost him, and then I went home. My husband and I went over it over and over again. How could the man possibly kill my husband if he didn't know him or even where we lived? Then, some of the things he said started to ring in my head. How he'd been watching me at the grocery store. I started to think that maybe he hadn't just meant that night. How long? How many days had he been watching me there? When I told him I was married, he said he knew. Is it possible he had followed me home on previous occasions even? We put extra locks on the doors and took extra precautions. We tried to forget about it. He was probably just some crazy guy, right? Well, about a week later, around 8 or 9 p.m., my husband decided to run up to the gas station to get some cigarettes. I was sitting on the computer in our dining room as he left through the garage door. Our son was sleeping in his bedroom on the other side of the house. About a minute after he had left, though, suddenly I heard the garage door into the laundry room open and somebody coming inside. Immediately, I assumed my husband must be grabbing something he'd forgotten. I called out to him and didn't get a response, so I called his name again. I received no answer, but I could hear someone moving around in the laundry room. I started to get worried. All the guns in the house were in our room. I would have to walk right past the laundry room to get to them. Suddenly, I heard my 2 pit bulls in my room start growling. Both dogs started barking viciously and ran toward the laundry room door, at which point I heard the laundry room door to the garage open and slam shut very quickly. At that point, I grabbed my phone. I ran into my son's room and called my husband to ask if he had just returned home for something. To my horror, he was still at the gas station. I told him someone was in the house, but I thought the dogs had scared them out. He instructed me to stay in our son's bedroom with the door closed. He was on his way home, so I sat there in the dark next to my sleeping son in sheer terror. 2 minutes later, I heard the dogs barking again and someone barging into the house through the garage door. After what felt like forever, my husband came into our son's bedroom. He checked the whole house and all around our property, but couldn't find anybody. We came to the conclusion that the stalker from the gas station must have finally taken his opportunity to catch me alone. Based on what that creepy tweaker had said to me, who else could it have been? What really freaked me out though is not knowing how long he had been watching me before that. How long had he been watching me before he approached me at the gas station and before he barged into our home? It really opened my eyes that someone could stalk you without you ever knowing about it until it's too late to do anything. I firmly believe my 2 pit bulls saved my life, my son's life, and possibly my husband's too that night. That had my husband not let the dogs into the house before he left, I wouldn't be here right now, nor would my son. To this day, anytime I have to be home alone, or my new husband and I are sleeping, I have to have my pit bull beside me to watch over me. Another good old story from South Africa. As people from there might know, there are a lot of game farms, lodges, and those types of facilities, especially around the area of Kruger National Park. This incident took place on a very tranquil 4-star game farm close to the southern tip of the aforementioned park. We frequented this lodge often over the 5 years before this incident. It was a favorite with me and my wife actually, who was at the time still my girlfriend. The lodge had a very nice central area, with a pool, restaurant, and then tented chalets were spread around, with the furthest one about 1 kilometer from the restaurant. They were very private and set up in the bush as well. You couldn't see the next one over because of this, and could only really hear your neighbors if they were very loud. Sadly, the lodge had fallen on some hard times and gone backwards a bit. The weekend this incident took place, only 2 of the 25+ units were occupied for that Friday night, and we were the only ones there on Saturday. Honestly, that made me feel a little bit uneasy. To make matters even worse, the lodge/farm manager came by on Saturday morning, saying he would be leaving for the weekend as well. He told us if we needed anything to just help ourselves to the restaurant fridges and leave a note. We could settle the bill at a later time. Sure, no problem I guess. We had the pool and jacuzzi and the rest of the facilities all to ourselves. We left to go for a visit to the KMP after the manager left and stayed out most of the day. We got back around 3 p.m. and right as we got out of the car, I immediately got goosebumps. It was 35 degrees Celsius out, over 100 degrees in Fahrenheit, so I definitely was not getting those from being cold. We had parked about 150 meters away and had a little path we liked to walk down. As we approached though, I noted some large shoe prints over me and my girlfriend's prints from that morning. That put me even more on edge. I approached further and noticed the prints turned around suddenly and walked back the way they had come. Everything seemed to be in order when we got there though. We went for a bit of a swim and a bit of a game drive around the farm as well, and returned at around 5:30. I started to make the fire, barbecue the meat, and prepare some other food. Those footprints still had me and my girlfriend on edge though, and we were both very quiet. We sat down at around 8 p.m. to have dinner together. As we sat down though, I could tell my girlfriend looked very worried. I asked her what was wrong. She said she had a really bad feeling for some reason, and we had to go right now. I felt the same, honestly. We needed to leave now, not after we ate, right this moment. We checked the food in the cooler, grabbed everything we could, and ran to the car. We jumped in and raced out of there. As we went out the gate and started to drive away, the feeling of dread slowly left us as well. We made the 150-kilometer drive home in the dark and slept in our own beds that night. We woke up on Sunday and went about our day as normal. About 4 p.m. that afternoon, though, my phone number rings. I saw it was the number from the lodge manager. I answered, and he frantically asked if we were okay. I said, yeah, why? He started explaining what happened, and I got ice cold. Apparently, that very same night, the lodge was broken into and ransacked. They took everything of value, and what they couldn't take had been destroyed. It seemed it was a group of men that had done it. Apparently, there was evidence they had ransacked one of the abodes as well. Only one. The one my girlfriend and I had booked into. The one we would have been sleeping in had we not left so abruptly the previous night. That means they had been watching us the whole time. The lodge had cameras, but the part we were staying in did not. We left just after 8 p.m., probably about 8:20 or so. Cameras caught the first signs of movement at the lodge just before 8:30. At least one was visibly armed with a firearm in the footage, and a few had machetes as well. I shudder to think what would have happened had we actually been there. The nearest people would have been over 3 kilometers away in a straight line, and we were completely alone out there. There wasn't any cell reception at the lodge either. We wouldn't have been able to call for help. Needless to say, we did not go to lodges or isolated areas for a long time after. And sadly, even though we loved that place, it went under not long after too. I saw some ads it was being sold on bank auction. That incident shocked us both a bit, and we vowed to always trust our instincts and intuition from then on. Also, to tell each other if something ever felt off to one of us. We both had that uneasy feeling since about 3 that afternoon when we came back, but the reason neither of us said anything was because we didn't want to spoil the trip for the other. The cost was almost the ultimate price. Lesson to be learned here: trust your gut and tell your partner what you're feeling. If something feels off, it's probably because it is. It may just save your life. This story happened when I was a junior in high school. I'm a girl and was a friendly/curious person. 1 month into the fall semester, we got a new transfer student. He looked very nervous. Seated behind me, his name was Joe. I, of course, introduced myself to him, trying to ease some of his tension. I helped to teach him what we'd learned so far, and I helped him look over his class schedule as well. We had 2 classes and lunch period together. Naturally, because of all this interaction, we got to know each other and become somewhat good friends. He was a quiet kid on his own, but he talked quite a lot around me. I assume that just meant he was very comfortable with me. I made it very clear we were just friends, by the way, and he seemed not even interested in anything else. We started hanging out with my group of friends as well. Fast forward to spring break. I told Joe I was going out of town with my family. He seemed very disappointed we couldn't spend the break together, but he said it was understandable. A while later, though, I ran into Joe in a restaurant. I hadn't told him where I was going, so I thought to myself, wow, well, what a coincidence, right? He said he happened to be visiting family in the same town. Going along further in senior year, Joe and I were now hanging out at least once a week. Then that turned into 2, then that turned into 3. I started to notice we were spending a bit too much time together. I wanted to make time for my other friends too, you know? That's when things started to change. I would run into Joe everywhere, or should I say it was more like I'd see him out of the corner of my eye whenever I was spending time with someone else, or hiding behind something when I was by myself. It was obviously very obsessive and clingy. The first 2 or 3 times, I didn't really think that much of it. It all became clear, though, when I questioned him on why this was happening. He told me he was accidentally following me because he wanted to make sure I was safe. Well, now I felt really creeped out. He apologized and asked for forgiveness, but I told him I didn't want to be friends anymore. He got furious and stormed out. He didn't come to school for the next 2 or 3 days. My friends had told me he'd begun harassing them for snitching on him or something. I don't really know how that made sense. He did come back to school eventually, only to pretend he didn't know me. One particular day on my walk home, I began to hear Joe calling my name in a low and unfamiliar tone. When I looked around, though, he was nowhere to be seen. I didn't know why in that moment, but my gut told me I needed to run away as fast as I could. I started sprinting and kept running until I got home. I was too scared to look back. I made sure every door and window was locked up tight. Actually, I hadn't seen him the entire way. I almost convinced myself I was just being paranoid when my phone screen lit up. Joe was calling me repeatedly. Then I heard him calling my name again. I went to check. He was in front of my house now. He began to bang on the door. I called my dad and told him what happened. I pleaded for Joe to just go away. Everything went completely silent after 5 minutes, which felt like an eternity. The last words I heard from him as he left were, "You'll always be my best friend." The issue was brought up to the school, but Joe never showed up again after. Now 4 years have passed by, and just a few days ago, I got friend requests on 2 of my social media accounts. It was Joe. I blocked him and changed my names to something else. I don't live in the same town, I don't live in the same country. Now I'm on the other side of the world. Still though, I can't help but feel scared like 18-year-old me again. I've become much more cautious around other people because of him. I did report him and get a restraining order against him when that happened. Warning, this story has some graphic details. So I'm just gonna get it out there because it's been heavy on my shoulders for about a month now. The night of National Day here in my country, after having a nice meal with some of my friends, my boyfriend asked me to go check on one of his friends. They had a father-son kind of relationship, and his friend was not feeling very well. He had some heart-related conditions, and my boyfriend was quite worried. On our way home, we decided to stop by his place real quick, around 10 at night. We got there, drank a beer, had a friendly chat with him, his wife, and his stepson for a moment. After about 45 minutes, we were just about to leave when we heard a crazed howling coming from outside in front of the house. In retrospect, it almost sounded like a zombie's growling. His stepson cautiously opened the door and asked what was going on. He didn't even have time to finish his sentence before a man erupted at the door. He was covered in blood. I mean dark black, dried blood. So much of it, I almost thought he was a different ethnicity because his skin had such a dark tone from all that blood. It took me about 30 seconds to realize that all that blood was coming from 2 gigantic, gaping wounds in the side of his head. I must say, he looked and sounded like a living corpse. There were 3 gashes. The biggest was on the middle from his forehead all the way down to the back of his head, 2 inches wide at the largest. The guy began to scream and yell and thrash around before falling to the ground and freezing just like in the movies. We jumped into action. This guy was clearly not in good shape. We brought him out without looking back. I can't really explain what went through my mind in that moment, but I knew that if we were not on our way to the hospital right now, this man would not survive. I sat him down on the front passenger seat and did my best to keep him awake while my boyfriend drove. We called 911 the minute we got onto the road so they could send an ambulance to meet us on the way there. The agent on the phone started asking me to pull the car onto the side of the highway and wait for the ambulance to get there, but we couldn't do that. The man was clearly going to die very soon. We kept on going as fast as possible. We arrived at the hospital before the ambulance and the police. As soon as we got there, medics rushed outside and came to help him right away. The police then arrived too, and took our disposition. Guess what happened next though? The man had been so badly hurt that he fell into a coma only 30 minutes after arriving, before the police could interrogate him as to what happened. From that moment on, police started procedures for a homicide investigation, and we were considered the prime suspects. They finally let us go home at 4 a.m. They came back the next day asking further questions and letting us know that now they knew we were not related to this crime. They informed us the man had also escaped the hospital the next morning. The attack was probably gang-related, and those gashes had been done by a machete. He'd managed to survive the attack because he was completely strung out on heroin. I'll never forget that night, and that man's horrifying screams. At least I can hold on to the fact that I helped to save a life. I've been wanting to share this for a while, so here goes. In 2007, when I was 12 years old, my family and I took a trip to Key Biscayne, Florida, with some of my cousins and family friends. Naturally, while at the resort, my cousins and I would all hang out at the kids' club. Well, there were always a bunch of kids to hang out with, epic chicken fingers with ranch dressing, and tons of fun games for us all to play. There was a director of the kids' club who watched us and facilitated all of the activities. His name was Dan. In retrospect, I'm sure you can imagine Dan was a major fucking creep. He was around 40 years old, super tall, skinny, and was balding quite badly. The worst part is that he always made us call him Dan the Animal Man. Side note, these sorts of memories leave me in awe of how naive and blinded to danger I was. I'm sure most of us were as a kid, really. If I ever met this guy now, I wouldn't want to get within a 5-foot radius of him. At 12 years old, though, I was thinking he was awesome. Time is a wonderful thing, I suppose. Anyway, I digress. It was made clear to all of us suddenly that Dan, for unknown reasons, was leaving the hotel in a week. None of this fazed me, though. On our last day there, I just so happened to lose my cell phone. It was a bright blue chocolate cell phone, if anyone remembers those gems with the spinning wheel. I quickly told my parents I couldn't find it. Considering this was already the second phone I'd lost that year, my mom yelled at me and told me if I didn't find it, I'd be grounded for a long time. I rushed around the entire hotel, looking everywhere for my phone. Along the way, I just so happened to go into the kids' club to see if anyone there had found it. The room that was typically bustling with kids and activity was now eerily quiet and empty. Dan was just sitting on a couch all by himself. "Hey, Dan, did you by chance see my phone?" I asked him. He responded right away. "Oh, yeah. Actually, I found it and put it in the lost and found in the basement. Come with me, I'll show you." Thinking nothing of this, I mindlessly followed behind Dan as he led me all the way to the back of the hotel. We had walked for around 3 minutes before we arrived at the foot of an abandoned stairwell leading into a dark basement. We were now at the very back of the hotel, in a strange area I'd never seen before, and no one else was in sight. "Are you sure it's down here?" I asked, very confused. I was staring down a long flight of stairs leading into pitch black darkness. The walls were made of unpainted concrete. It didn't even look like it could be a storage area, let alone a basement with a lost and found. Dan nodded happily and held the door open for me, motioning for me to head down myself. Something in that moment suddenly woke up. I'm not sure if it was instinct, fear, or just luck, but I immediately knew I could not go down there. Before Dan could say or do anything, I blurted out, "Never mind, I think I left it with my mom." I darted as fast as I could back to the hotel lobby. I was shaken up. Something about that situation was not right. I just knew he was going to hurt me. As a kid who wore rose-colored glasses and was overly trusting of others, that really shook me. I tried to compose myself and figured I'd investigate a bit more just to be sure. I walked up to the concierge of the hotel and asked them where the lost and found was because I'd lost my phone recently. The woman at the front desk was very nice and told me the lost and found was just right there, right next to her. She then asked me what kind of phone I'd lost. After I told her it was a blue chocolate flip phone, she smiled and pulled it right out of the box under her desk. "Don't worry, someone turned it in here earlier," she said and handed me my phone with a big smile. "Wait, so you're telling me the lost and found isn't in the basement?" I stammered. "No, sweetie, the hotel is still under construction. The basement is being rebuilt. There's not even any electricity down there or anything." That scared the absolute shit out of me. I couldn't shake the feeling that man was dangerous. At the time, I was sharing a hotel room with my cousin, and she was the only person I told. Considering she was only 8 at the time, I think all I did was really freak her out. Now I'm 26 though, and I think back on that moment a lot. I wonder, what if? What would have happened to me if I'd gone down to the basement with Dan the Animal Man? It truly feels like one of the most critical junctures of my entire life. I'm happy I knew to get the hell out of there before it was too late. I recently contacted that hotel to inquire about past Kid Club employees named Dan from 2007, just to see if he's still around somewhere, or on a sex offenders list, maybe even in jail. I told them this whole story, but they refused to give me any information about him and sounded pretty sketchy about it, honestly. I'll continue to do some research, and if I ever find more information, I suppose I'll tell you guys as well. Recently, I was shopping in a very popular department store when I had the feeling I needed to use the bathroom. The women's restroom was all the way in the very back of the store, right near an emergency exit. This meant it was pretty secluded. I walked in the 2-stall bathroom. One of them was already taken. Without thinking anything of it, I went into the only other stall available. As soon as I locked the door, though, the person in the other stall, without even flushing, unlocked their door and walked over to the sink. I was not really thinking too much of it in that moment. I'm kind of shy, so I was just sitting there waiting for them to leave. Instead, they did nothing. Now, I was kind of confused. I pieced together they were not washing their hands, and they'd never flushed the toilet either. I slowly tilted my head down as quietly as possible to look underneath the stall. I noticed that whoever this was very clearly wearing large men's boots and ratty jeans. Now I was really scared. I'm a natural worrier already, and we were in a very secluded area. I tried to calm myself down and count to 15 to give them a chance to prove me wrong. Maybe it was just a girl fixing her makeup or something. As I was counting, though, I realized that even if it was a woman fixing her hair or something like that, I would surely have heard some sort of shuffling or any noise at all. Instead, it was complete silence. I counted all the way to 15 and still no movement. Now I was fully shaking. I realized just how alone we were. I was cornered in a bathroom with what I assumed was a large man based on their legs. I reached into my purse to fake a phone call. I was so nervous I didn't even think to try to make my phone ring by playing a ringtone first. I just put it to my ear and said, "Hello?" I was too nervous to even keep making up conversation because I didn't know what the man would do. Luckily, as soon as I did this, he left immediately. I watched his feet under the stall to make sure he was gone. Even creepier, I watched him walk to the right. As I exited the bathroom as fast as I could, I noticed that to the right of this restroom was the emergency exit door, now propped open. Who knows what this guy wanted to do, or where he wanted to bring me. There could have been a car right out back waiting for us for all I know. I still can't imagine the face I would have seen looking back at me if I'd just finished my business and left the stall. I told the store manager after, and I kinda feigned concern, but I could tell they either didn't really care or didn't believe me. I even called their headquarters the next day to report it again. So I made this friend on Reddit named Carl. I met Carl because we frequented a lot of the same subreddits and would always seem to bump into each other in different threads. I used to be quite active on the site, but now I mostly browse every now and then. Carl private messaged me drunk one night, saying he needed a friend but had no one else to talk to, and that he needed to vent some shit about his life. I obliged him, and we swiftly became friends. Then we even became pen pals. We'd email every day pretty much, or message each other on Discord. We shared and talked about all kinds of things. We vented about our lives, about our personal situations. As far as I knew, Carl was a couple of years older than me, originally from Russia, but now living in Colorado. He had a child and a girlfriend as well, it seemed. He'd posted various pictures of himself in different places, and he'd also posted a lot on the genealogy subreddit with his DNA results. Eventually, though, as time continued on, Carl started getting mad whenever I didn't reply quickly enough, and he started acting quite strange as well. Things were still fine though for the most part. He seemed to love drama and reveled in talking shit about people, so he would do that quite a lot. I very quickly noticed as well that he was extremely paranoid about many things. I didn't take this too seriously at first. At one point, I made a forum based on 2007 LiveJournal, where we'd basically just post stories of our lives every day. This other random person joined it, John, who was apparently already friends with Carl. They both claimed that they went to the same high school. It had been about a year of friendship at this point, when I started to notice that some of Carl's stories weren't exactly adding up, and neither were John's actually. Something seemed to be a little bit off here, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what. We still continued being friends, and I got somewhat close to both Carl and John. I must confess though that I did lie to them a bit. I never gave them my real name. I said I lived in Wyoming as well, even though I lived nowhere near there. I just looked up some random information on a city in Wyoming and claimed I lived there. Other than that though, most of the things I told them were true. I was just concerned for privacy reasons. For some reason I didn't quite understand. I didn't want these two to know exact names and details. Carl could be really creepy obsessive sometimes. He would look up different websites to see shit I'd posted and then deleted, and ask me why I'd removed it. I started to get even more suspicious. At one point, I decided to try something. I sent a link on Facebook to both Carl and John. You could only see it though if you joined a private group, which meant you had to use your real Facebook account. John ended up joining. I found out he lived in New Hampshire, nowhere near where Carl lived. I messaged him and asked if he really did go to school with Carl. He claimed that he did, but immediately after I asked, he told Carl I'd been snooping around. I forget exactly how the rest of this went down, but at one point I had sent a picture of an art piece I'd done to Carl. Now that he knew I was looking into him, in the background was my cat, with her tag visible as well. Carl blew up the photo, zoomed in, and saw my mother's phone number on the tag. He used Spokio to find her, then found her Facebook, then found me. Carl then confronted me, saying he knew where I really lived, my real name, my address, and knew everything about my mom as well. He asked why I'd lied, and threatened me for lying to him. He said he was tracking me down and going to get revenge for trying to track John down too. He tried to backpedal and claim that was a joke, but I could tell he was really being serious. I was so creeped out I didn't know what to do. My first thought was to ask him to talk to me himself and try to figure out a way to resolve things peacefully. He made up a bunch of excuses as to why he couldn't do that. I found out that his name was not Carl. He was also not from Colorado. The pictures were not of him, of course, and most of the details he'd told me were absolutely fake. He was not even Russian. His entire online profile was completely fabricated. I'm not even sure whose life he was trying to fake in that case. And John? He barely even knew Carl. For whatever reason, he just decided to help Carl lie to me and track me down. He was the one that helped Carl find all my information. John's real name was John, in fact, and that was indeed his real Facebook that I'd found, but I couldn't find out anything about who Carl was. Carl began to tell me he knew everything about me, but I knew nothing about him. He was going to find the people in my life and try to make it a living hell. I ghosted him and tried my best to remove my presence from online. As far as I know, he never messed with my family or my girlfriend. He never shipped anything dangerous to my house like he said he would or anything like that. We just never spoke again after. It's definitely creepy as fuck that some stranger knew everything about me, but I knew nothing about them. I guess I got lucky in the end that he wasn't really serious about doing something bad to me. I'm a woman. At the time of this tale, I was 27 years old. I was living with my boyfriend, now fiancé, in the same home we live in today, in fact. Our home is a small beach cottage with multiple windows on all sides. The home was moved in the 70s from a rural beach town just a few miles from here to our quaint neighborhood amongst the sprawling brick branches, in what I imagine at the time to be a desirable little working-class neighborhood on the edge of town. Around the time of my story, my boyfriend would make frequent trips out of town, often for work purposes, but also on occasion to assist his older parents who lived out of state. He'd help them with repairs, remodeling, etc. This typically meant he'd be gone for a few weeks, but sometimes up to 2 months at a time even. At this point, he'd been out of town for a week or so. I was just going along with my day-to-day life like normal. Going to work at my 9 to 5, working out in the evening, doing some chores, rinse and repeat every day. One night as I was lying in bed, on the very cusp of my sleepy melatonin stupor, suddenly I was jolted wide awake with an overwhelming feeling to get up and check all the windows were locked right away. Even in my groggy state, I thought that was such a strange impulse, other than the fact I hadn't checked the windows since my boyfriend had left. I had no logical reason to think to do that right now. I didn't hear any strange sounds, I didn't see anything weird, nothing of that nature. Begrudgingly, I dragged myself from my cozy cocoon, though, to go and check all the windows. Most were locked up tight, but there were a few that had in fact been left unlocked. I threw the lock latches that had been left unsecured and groggily stumbled back to bed, not thinking anything else about it as I drifted off to sleep. The next morning, as usual, I woke up to my alarm blaring from my phone and began to prepare myself for work. I just started a water kettle for my beloved French press when I stood at the kitchen window waiting for the whistle. My entire body was instantly coated in goosebumps as I noticed a single clean slice in my kitchen window screen. Utterly shocked, I ran to the office, then the guest room, then the laundry room. As I'm sure you've already guessed, every single screen in my home had a clean slice through it, a slice just large enough to fit someone's hand through. All but 3 out of the 18 windows in my house had been tampered with. The 3 that were left untouched were the windows to my bedroom. The bedroom I'd been peacefully sleeping my butt off in while someone was attempting to break into my house. By this time, my kettle was screeching at me to remove it from the heat. I ran to the kitchen to answer the kettle's call while attempting to not keel over from a second heart attack I was having before even dressed. Needless to say, I was freaked out beyond measure. The cops were called and a detective came out to investigate. On the back side of my house, he noticed a single handprint on one of the windows. He tried to test for fingerprints, but it was determined the person attempting to break in had been wearing gloves. He of course had no proof, but he also believed the person must have known I was in that room. Nothing ever came of the investigation. I can't explain why I suddenly got the urge to get out of bed that night, but I know to trust my gut now. Back a while ago, I used to date this particular guy. After about 6 months of dating or so, he started being gone for hours at a time, with no way to communicate with him at all. Cell phones weren't really a thing back then. Sometimes he did do deliveries out of state, but it only happened every couple of months. At first, I didn't really think anything of it. He always had a perfectly prepped excuse for everything. Sometimes he'd come back smelling like chemicals. He'd come over to my house and shower, then change clothes as soon as he walked in the door. I never met his parents. I never met any of his friends. One day, I noticed his work gloves were kinda stained and rough looking. I just mentioned that he needed some new gloves and didn't really think anything about it. He began to get progressively more creepy, until I finally decided I'd had enough and broke it off with him. He harassed me for weeks after. I had to change my phone number and email address. When he found out my work information, he started calling and emailing me there too. I did my best to try and ignore him. After a while, it just stopped altogether. A month goes by. My car was broken into at work, and they took the change from the cup holder, OTC meds, and my registration. I worked downtown and assumed it was some junkies at the time. About a week later, though, suddenly I was woken up in the middle of the night to someone right on top of me. I could feel their rough gloves wrapped around my neck, and my heart was beating a mile a minute. Luckily for me, my friend just so happened to show up banging at the door that exact moment. My would-be rapist/murderer ran to the sliding glass door, opened it easily, and climbed down the balcony of my apartment. He took off into the night. My friends knew they could come to my house to sleep off a wild night and call me if they needed a ride home. Because of this, it was not an unusual occurrence for someone to show up on a Friday or Saturday night. Lucky for me, this was pre-Uber and Lyft, and cabs were gross and expensive. I drove my friend home and stayed there for a few days. I moved after and got a different job as well. While I still lived in an apartment, I kept my registration and my purse after that. I swear the person who did that was my ex, and I never heard from him again after. My friends Jessica and James have been together for roughly 6 years, and they've lived in their house for over a year now. I'm over quite often as well. I've been friends and co-workers with Jessica for 4 years. They're both wonderful people, and they've kind of adopted me into their family. They keep me alive by feeding me a few times a week, so I'm very grateful to them. I was over for dinner after work a few weeks ago. We all arrived at their place within minutes of each other. We all drank and caught up, and after a little while, James went outside to grill up some steaks. He came inside, though, and asked why I'd kissed the door. I was pretty confused, of course. I went over to the sliding glass door where he was. Sure as the world is round, there was a kiss print on the outside of the door, lipstick and everything. Few things first. James and Jessica are both shorter than I am. He's about 5'8" and she's 5'2". I'm 5'11". The kiss print was at a height that if I popped up my balls of my feet, I could just barely reach that spot with my lips, far above where either of them could reach. I hadn't worn any of that sort of stuff in many, many years. They both thought it was me playing a prank on them for some reason. Jessica on the lipstick. I guess they thought I could have just been trying to freak them out or something. Spoiler alert, it was not me. I happen to be a smoker, so I did frequent their back porch through that door. I guess that made it all the more suspicious. Their porch was pretty difficult to get to as well. We got 3 sides, right? Well, the right side is a 30-foot drop, the left side is a 10-foot drop with a spiked fence, and inside that fence is immediately James' grill and some workout equipment. It was a pretty narrow, not easily navigated space. The front of the porch, I suppose, would be the easiest way to get in, but you'd have to be quite dedicated to climb all that way. They had real thick, tall hedges around the entire thing, too. You'd get pretty scraped up trying to do all this. At this point, I was thinking Jessica just climbed up on a chair and was trying to prank me or something. James cleaned off the glass, and we quickly went on with our night. A few nights later, though, I'm back at their place. I was going outside for a smoke when I saw another kiss mark on the glass, in the same place as before. About a foot below that was a smudgy heart drawn in dirt crudely. I'm not sure if this person had really greasy hands or if they used spit or something, but that was extra creepy. I pointed this out to my friends, and again they thought it was me. James even insisted I clean it off. None of us were the type to prank exactly. I still felt the most logical explanation was Jessica was doing this for some reason. The next time it happened, a few days later, I hadn't been there for a while. Jessica called me up. She was a little bit accusatory and rattled, of course. I did have a key to their home. She asked me if I had used it to go inside and write something on the glass again, because when they'd woken up, they noticed some writing on the door. I told her it was not me. She let it go, but I could still tell she was kind of suspicious. At this point, I knew it wasn't her either. It could be, but she would have given up the ghost already. She seemed to be genuinely mad and scared of me. It didn't seem funny at all. It happened many more times as well. Once even when I was over there. Then there was a break for about a week. Then it started up in earnest when I wasn't there for a while. I had to go to another state for work. While I was gone, Jessica video called me. She saw I was in my hotel room, not there, and just started freaking out. She said this whole time she'd really been holding out hope it was me. At least then it wouldn't be terrifying. Alas, I was 1,000 miles away. There was new writing on her back door, seemingly made that very same night, with a heart drawn underneath as well. She apologized to me for being so adamant it was me. She just hadn't wanted to be wrong. I told her it was okay, but also told her the person she should really be calling right now is the police. She did call them. They came several hours later, looked around for 5 minutes, and pretty much just told her, "Hey, that's weird." They told her she could take some pictures and submit them online. Wow, thanks guys, what a big help. We were all completely freaked out. We don't really know what's going on. They ordered a camera and it came a couple of days ago. They put it on the porch, but so far nothing. I'll let you know if anything further happens. About 10 years ago, after graduating from high school, me and 5 of my friends, all girls by the way, decided we were going to rent out a house together right by campus. We were all fairly young, 17 to 19 years old, and very broke as well. The house wasn't exactly in the best neighborhood. One night, we had some people over. Nothing crazy, just a few of our friends. We were all hanging out on our front porch and having a few beers together. We called it a night around 1 or 2 a.m. All of our friends went home and we all went to bed. The next morning, we were woken very startlingly to a knock from the police. One of the girls let us know the cops were at our door, so we all came downstairs in a panic. Naturally, we thought we were in some sort of trouble. The officer informed us there had been some sketchy activity on our front porch last night. At first, we thought he was talking about us having a party with people over, but no. Apparently, sometime after we'd gone to bed, there was a man in his late 40s or early 50s, looking through all our windows. The officer had just happened to be driving by and saw the man peering in. When the man saw the officer, he frantically grabbed an empty beer can off our front porch and sat down on one of our chairs. He pretended to be drinking. The officer obviously thought this was even stranger, so he stopped to see what was going on here. He asked the man if he lived in the house. The man had told him he was a close friend of ours and that all of us had just turned in for the night. He'd decided to finish his beer before he took off. He started describing things about us in a horrifying amount of detail, even some things he shouldn't have known. It seemed he'd been watching us for some time. I'm sure the officer could tell some sketchy shit was going on here, as he offered to give the man a ride to wherever he lived. The man hesitated for a moment and insisted he simply wanted to finish his beer. The cop just told him to come with him. When he did a search of the man's name, tons of charges came up. The scariest part was all the charges of pedophilia he had, quite a lot of them. Thank God for that officer driving by. We checked our windows the next day, only to find they'd been unlocked, and some of them had been tampered with. This guy would have had no trouble at all climbing through one of those windows while we were asleep. Needless to say, we made sure every window was secure in that house, and we were a lot more cautious of our surroundings from then on. The cop actually gave us the name of the man, so we could look him up along with all of his pages of charges. This guy was terrifying. One of those people where you can just tell from the look in their eyes that they're not someone you want to associate with. Still gives me the chills to think about. What is up guys, Blue Spooky here. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you liked the video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. if you feel so inclined. If you have any feedback for me as well, be sure to leave that in comments below the video. If you guys have a story you'd like to send in, or if you'd like to contact me for any reasons, there will be links to my social media in the description below the video, including my Facebook, Gmail, and Twitter accounts. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is if it has one, what type of story it is if it has one, and how you'd like to be credited in the description below the video. Please make sure to include as much detail as you feel comfortable with, and try to use as much proper grammar as possible to make sure you have the highest chance of appearing in a future video. Overall, I think that's pretty much it for now, guys, so thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.